Hi, everybody. Oh, sorry, I'd like to thank Rob and the Next Money team for inviting me to speak, and it's been a really interesting session hearing about all the different countries all over the world and what's going on in the fintech scene, so it's great to meet everybody. I'd like to start with an introduction of myself and Payoneer. So my name is Natalie Shiori Fleming. I'm half Japanese, half Canadian. I am the Director of Banking and Regulatory Relations for Asia Pacific at Payoneer, and I'm also a founding member of the FinTech Association of Japan. Probably a lot of you haven't heard of Payoneer because it's mostly a B2B company, but we serve over 3 million customers in over 200 countries and help them collect cross-border business payments. And we have about 800 employees. Officially, we're headquartered in New York, but as Ed already mentioned, our founder is Israeli. We're effectively an Israeli company, which makes us global. And Japan is one of our core markets. And in Japan, I helped get us regulated as a fund transfer service provider. And while I think from the outside it looks like Japan's an opaque, hard to understand, difficult to enter market, it's actually much more open, I think, to global companies than people expect. As you can see, Japan is the third biggest economy globally on a GDP basis, but we're also the second biggest market for retail consumer finances with over 16.2 trillion US dollars in personal financial assets. It's a very middle-class economy, and despite the population being relatively tech-savvy, financial literacy is quite low, and it's also a market where the population is shrinking and there's not a lot of growth opportunity. So at this point, 53% of people's money is held in cash and deposits. As you may know, Japan has negative interest rates, so the banks aren't providing anybody, I don't think the banks have passed on the negative rates to customers, but you're not earning anything on your cash. But there's also deflation, so I guess on a nominal basis, maybe not on a nominal basis, but on a PPP basis, you're not actually losing very much, but you're not gaining anything. Only 20% of Japanese people use online banking based on a survey done by the BOJ by telephone. If you look at the data when people do online surveys, it is higher, but this is probably a lot more realistic. This is despite 83% internet usage and 72% smartphone ownership. I'd also like to note that, as Amit mentioned, Japan is ahead of the game in a lot of things, and Japanese feature phones were actually relatively advanced. They had NFC payments, they had TV, they had everything on them, but eventually Apple came into the market and everybody's like, okay, fine, smartphones. So the remaining people probably have a regular Japanese feature phone, which is actually probably relatively technologically advanced. And so people still like going into the branches, doing basic banking with ATMs, and still a very cash-based society. Also on the payment side, there are relatively large merchants that don't collect card payments, even though that they are widely available. And I guess this 20% is a really, really crazy figure when you think about the fact that actually 70% of people shop online. And although they mention security of their funds as one of the key reasons for not using online banking, I think a lot of it has to be with the usability, with all the different passwords, because the usability is much lower than an e-commerce website. Also, the population's aging, so there's a high ratio of older population, people who are not as comfortable using digital services, especially when it relates to money. And in general, the availability of bank branches and ATMs, there's bank branches, there's ATMs in every convenience store all over the cities, so maybe there's just less of a need for fintech services. But that being said, in 2015, the awareness started growing about the fintech industry, and in 2016, we've seen a lot of action from the government, from the regulators, from the industry overall, to start building the industry and realizing that fintech could potentially help people use digital services. And in 2017, we expect the FinTech Ecosystem to grow even further. As of today, we account approximately 150 fintech startups. This is just a select few of them, but there are startups in pretty much every subsector of fintech at this point, particularly in payments. Investments has been a really hot area in the past year or so. Accounting, some of the big ones in the market that people might be aware of, Money Forward, Free. And also in the PFM space and crowdfunding. Funds raised by fintech startups in Japan has also grown quite a bit. It doubled between 2014 and 2015 to 10 billion yen. And in 2016, I just got some numbers from one of my analyst friends, and he said that it looks like it was around 230 million USD equivalent. So again, fundraising by fintech doubling last year as well. In Japan, I think, compared to some other developed markets where people are very frustrated with their banks, it's a much more collaborative environment versus an adversarial one. Fintechs and financial services companies are working together to build better products and services for their customers. And so, like, some examples are MoneyTree working with Mizuho Bank to use their MT Link service to provide PFM services within the mobile banking app to Mizuho's customers, and AlpacaDB, which is an AI company, working with Jibun Bank, which is a mobile-first, online-only bank, to provide AI services for using AI for foreign currency deposit services. We've also seen the government and regulators become very positive towards the fintech scene in Japan. In 2015, the government created new regulations around cryptocurrencies, which were much more inviting and made it much clearer about how you could launch cryptocurrency services such as Bitcoin or blockchain in Japan. The FSA established a fintech support desk, similar to what they have in the UK, so that fintech companies could come to the FSA and talk to them about how to get regulated. And also they set up an expert panel on fintech startups to get a better understanding of the market. The FinTech Association of Japan has also been very actively involved in a lot of committees on how to improve the regulation and make it easier for fintechs to launch in Japan and provide better services for customers. And sorry, I probably should have done this in the beginning, but the FinTech Association was actually originally launched by me and my friend Hiroki Kudo, who's the CEO of Marybiz. We started with our first meetup with about 30 people, and everybody's like, oh, this is actually really good to talk to other people in the market, so we decided to continue doing it. As we started doing the meetup, it grew, the fintech industry got buzzy, and we realized it wasn't just about community building, but it was about policy setting, and there's a lot of other things that we could do. So in September of 2015, we launched the FinTech Association with about 40 members, including all 3 mega banks. And from there, it's grown even further, and we now have about 220 members, of which 60 fintech startups, so about half the startups in the industry, and over 100 corporates. And we see not only financial services companies getting involved, but also a lot of IT companies, consulting firms, and a lot of different diverse companies looking at how to use fintech to provide better services to customers. So again, it goes back to my point about the market being more collaborative. It takes us a while to get started on things, but once things go, they start moving quite quickly. And it's been, the regulators are actually quite open to allowing startups to get licenses. There are obviously requirements, but it's, I think, a very fair environment. That being said, there are quite a few challenges. One of the key some of the key ones include fundraising. I think compared to the US or UK or other developed markets, it's quite difficult to raise large amounts of money. And in Japan, raising between 5 and 10 million, probably relatively easy, but raising rounds in the hundreds of millions would be quite difficult, which would make it very hard to build a globally scalable company. Employee mobility. This isn't actually specific to fintech, but in Japan in general, for startups, a lot of people really prefer to have a stable job. So highly skilled workers go work for the big Japanese firms, and if they want to make money, they go work for the big foreign firms. So convincing somebody to take a risk and move to a startup in a market that's relatively risk adverse, and they have family that says, oh yeah, you shouldn't go work for a startup because think about your family, can be quite difficult. On the service demand side, I think Japan is pretty much 100% banked. Most people have multiple bank accounts because it's free. So there's less dissatisfaction when you're not paying a lot of fees for having a bank account. So even though they think that new fintech services like P2P transfers and whatnot are cool, they're not always willing to pay for them because, again, their banks are providing lots of services for free. And they're relatively slow to adopt. On the laws and regulations, I think that the government's actually made a really great positive direction in 2015, and in 2016 we expect even more discussion among the market to make sure that the regulations keep up with the innovation that's going on in the market. But anyways, like all that being said, I think this is really just the beginning. It's still very early stage. There are a lot of consumer-focused fintechs. I expect to see more B2B and infrastructure plays coming forward. And the market, according to Yano ICT, is expected to grow 9 times by 2020, which is actually a significant amount of growth. So I think you'll hear a lot more about what's going on in the Japanese fintech scene going forward. And as one of the members of the FinTech Association of Japan, we're looking to support the expansion of the Japanese FinTech ecosystem both locally and globally. So if you have anything that you want to know more about Japan or how we can work together, please come find me. Thank you.